Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this very special Drone Responders Webinar special event featuring the Defense Innovation Unit and the Blue UAS program. I think it's no secret that the Blue UAS program has been one of the most interesting topics affecting the US drone industry over the past 2 years. There's been some misconceptions, there's been a lot of rumors, there's been a lot of speculation about what exactly is happening and what the Blue UAS program is. So we thought it really made sense to answer some of those questions. And who better to answer those questions than the actual program managers at the Defense Innovation Unit. So I'm really pleased today to be joined by Shelby and Dave, who are program managers in the Autonomy Innovation Unit at DIU. And they are going to tell us all about DIU and the Blue UAS program. Shelby, Dave, take it away.
All right, thanks, Chris. So yeah, we'll do quick introductions for us, who we are. I'll do a quick overview of what DIU is and where we sit in sort of the DoD architecture. And then I've got some slides that I'll present, but more just to talk about stuff. I want to give you an overview of what Blue UAS is, a little bit about what Blue UAS isn't, and then I really want to leave the balance of time to answer your questions. So Chris is going to be sort of our gatekeeper for the questions. If you could just make sure they're recorded in the chat. Then Chris will be able to ask them to us. So, excuse me, as Chris mentioned, my name is Shelby Ox. I'm an active duty Marine officer in the Marine Corps. I'm a drone pilot by background. I've been at DIU for about a year as a PM in autonomy, and I've been working on small UAS and helping put together our Blue UAS program. Dave?
I'm Dave Michelson. I'm a PM also in the autonomy program for DIU. Been here for a little over 4 months, but I have a past life with DIU as well for Warfighter in Residence program, where I helped out with small range, small UAS back in 2019, 2020.
Yep. So DIU at the very top level, we're a Defense Innovation Unit. We fall under OSD R&E, the Office of Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. So we are a DoD organization, but we're a joint organization composed of all services, civilians, contractors as well, primarily focused on commercial industry. So our goal is to try to accelerate the adoption of commercial technology. Our organizing principle is if a widget exists already, then the DoD or the government should not invent that widget because it'll probably be not as good as the commercial version. Let's figure out a way to adopt and just procure the commercial version. We do that in order to try to transform our capacity and capabilities in the military. And then, probably most importantly, to strengthen our national security innovation base, right? If there are really interesting small companies out there making a widget or service that we need, then we should be working with them and be reliable partners in the DoD to try to make sure that they're there in the event that we need them, in a conflict. What makes us a little different is, again, we are a joint force. So we have representatives from all services. There's a lot of great innovation organizations out there in the DoD. And we all work well together, but we are joint. We're at the OSD level. We have a somewhat unique process in how we go about finding and scouting that commercial technology. And then our goal is not just the widget for the widget's sake, but it's the integration of the widget into the DoD, the adoption of that widget. So that's our focus. So just a little bit about UAS from the DoD perspective. Like it's no secret that robots are becoming more and more available. They're becoming more and more robust. They're becoming more and more, we're relying on them more and more for all facets of military operations, but also for public safety, for engineering, and then normal everyday tasks. It's our perception at DIU that the commercial industry has accelerated beyond the federal government in terms of R&D and development of those devices, because a commercial UAS now is nothing more than a derivative of some of the miniaturization efforts that have happened across other consumer electronics, cell phone industry, computers, other small robotics. So if those industries are accelerating in their development, we should try to find a way to keep up with them rather than create the military bespoke version. Our whole effort with Blue UAS is to say that we need to adopt and again accelerate the infusion of those commercial efforts rather than try to create them ourselves. Unfortunately, in the DoD, the acquisition system is not set up that way. There are challenges internally, and so Blue UAS is really a pathfinder for new acquisition processes, new prototyping processes, new approval processes it's not meant or intended to be a gatekeeper. We're essentially prototyping a process for the DoD that anyone can use. We're not doing anything special. We're not doing anything particularly unique. We're just doing it and hoping that the DoD will accept and adopt it. And we understand that there are implications and side effects to that. And we know that it has, if we make a move in Blue UAS for the DoD, that there are waves across the commercial industry as well. So that said, Blue UAS is meant to be part of the entire DoD solution. It's supposed to be a holistic and continuous approach to prototype and scale commercial technology. That's all it is it? Again, if a widget exists out there, let's not reinvent it, waste of time, money, energy. Let's figure out a way to adopt that widget. And traditionally, the barriers to its adoption are self-inflicted. They're usually some sort of DoD policy or practice or procedure that we can interrogate and try to offer a solution to overcome. So with that, I'm going to scroll down, just give a quick DoD and US government timeline of where we are. So back in May of 2018, the DoD banned the procurement of COTS UAS for cybersecurity concerns. So there were legitimate cybersecurity concerns with some COTS UAS. The DoD said, hey, we need to address those, so no one can buy COTS UAS anymore. It took a while for people to respond to that policy change. It definitely caused some ripple effects across the DoD. And around that time, though, around the fall of 2018 into the start of 2019, the US Army started prototyping a new program called SRR, Short Range Reconnaissance. It's meant to be a personal reconnaissance UAS, VTOL, multi-rotor, sub 3 pounds at the small unit level for reconnaissance of the next terrain feature to provide real-time situational awareness for units on the move. So that prototyping period began in 2019. While that prototyping was happening, the FY20 National Defense Authorization Act was signed into law, and Section 848 of that document prohibited the operation or procurement of foreign-made UAS. And that definition was, for covered countries was China, and it highlighted certain components within a UAS that had to be sourced from outside of China or from companies that are not domiciled in China. So that NDAA obviously had ripple effects across the DoD as well. And then January 2021, Executive Order 13981 was signed with a very similar language to the NDAA, but it's sort of expanding that to all other federal agencies. And then here in this past September, we finally got a implementation guidance across the line for how to actually do the procurement and operation of COTS type UAS. So it was a 3-year turn from basically when they were banned to when we came up with our plan to how to get COTS UAS back into that. Blue UAS has been a large part of that, and I'll get into that here in a minute. Pardon me while I scroll here. So Blue UAS, we basically organized the stuff that we're doing. And when I say we, it's Defense Innovation Unit PMs who are working Blue UAS. There's currently 4 of us. We have these 5 lines of effort. In the middle there is what we're calling our foundry. That's where we use our commercial solutions opening process to do prototyping of new hardware or new software that may be unique to a government customer. Basically, that's where a government customer or government partner has a unique problem that can't be solved by existing inventory. And we work with commercial vendors to tailor or adopt their solutions to that problem. We just call that the foundry. Again, that's just new prototyping stuff. SRR was an example of that prototyping effort, and I'll get into some of the other projects in a little bit as well. Just below that, we have the framework. The framework is a deliberate attempt to prototype and then field to industry a series of NDAA compliant and interoperable components and software that anyone in industry or government could then use in their systems. Here, the basic idea is that a drone is nothing but a series of components, commercial electronics, and software. If those are the Legos that you need to build your drone, if you go to the Lego bin and it's currently empty, there are no NDAA compliant or interoperable parts, then you can't make your end product. So we are trying to work with industry to fill that Lego bin back up with cameras, with flight controllers, with hand controllers, with autopilots, with other softwares that are then available for any integrator to use. And we know that they are enhanced capabilities. we know that they're interoperable, and for the DoD, most importantly, we know that they're NDAA compliant. The hub is what we just kicked that off. That's going to be where all this information will live. We're still designing that website, but the idea there is, since there's only 4 of us, we can't answer every question. We want to be able to put the information out there, share documentation, share artifacts. So the hub will be just basically where all this stuff lives once we get that up and running. And then I'm going to talk now about the on-ramp and cleared list, which are the efforts I'm currently working on right now with a project that we called Blue UAS 2.0. So our basic understanding is that there was no approval or vetting process for COTS UAS. In the DoD, if you have a COTS, a commercial off-the-shelf UAS that you want to use, then you have to get a 3-star general to sign your request, which is no easy task. And then you have to submit that request to a board of individuals at the service or the DoD level to review your request and provide you an approval. That approval is only good for usually 6 months, and it's often tied to a single drone, a single user, a single location, and a single use case. So it's a fairly prohibitive administrative burden for the average user. So, we looked at that, realized it was difficult. My previous job in the Marine Corps, I was the processor of those requests for the Marine Corps, and it was no easy task, and it was the majority of my day. I couldn't get anything else done, frankly. So here at DIU, we had the opportunity to try to prototype a new approval process, the on-ramp. What does that look like? If we wanted to just approve for every DoD user the basic admin tasks that they all have to do anyways, we could probably save money. Instead of having 10 people do the same admin, have one person do it once and provide those artifacts to whoever needs them. And then that informs our cleared list. That's just basically the list of drones that we have vetted and that we have said are, again, minimal admin requirements that are common. It is NDA compliant. It went through a risk management framework cybersecurity analysis. It has an authority to operate from a DoD organization and some version of an airworthiness / flight clearance. So those are the lines of effort at Blue UAS. And again, I want to talk a little bit more about the on-ramp and cleared list, which we're currently going through. Just to show you how we envision these things working together. Again, it all starts with the commercial market. We believe that industry will lead the change here, that they're the thought leaders in development of these systems, that we need to figure out a way to adopt them, but also support them, right? We need to be reliable partners as a government to support. If it's important for us to have allied or American drone makers, then we need to be supportive because, to be honest, none of us have Zenith TVs for a reason, right? That industry left. And if we want the drone industry to survive, then we have to be reliable partners. That informs framework. It informs our Foundry prototyping efforts, our on-ramp, and then eventually all comes to the stuff that we've looked at. Now, I want to highlight that the Blue UAS cleared list is a DIU-owned list. This is just the stuff that we've looked at, that we've had hands and eyes on, done some analysis, and provide at least some monitoring for. The cleared list is not intended to be exclusive, nor is it meant to be all-encompassing. What I mean is that there's a lot of agencies out there that are being told they have to use Blue UAS, and I understand, we're not naive. People are leveraging the work that we're doing, and we appreciate that. But we are ultimately focused on the DoD. We're also ultimately limited by budget and capacity. So we can't possibly be the clearinghouse for every single drone that's out there. This is just meant to be an option that exists somewhere between the arduous exception to policy COTS UAS waiver process and a military program of record that often is military bespoke capabilities with a limited fielding plan. So Blue UAS is meant to be an option in between, but the stuff that we're doing, the actual work we're doing, can be done by any government organization because there's no secret. It's a cyber assessment of the system, it's a compliance with the law, and it's an authority to operate in an airworthiness investigation. That's all we're doing. We're just doing the common admin. So any vendor that would like to sell drones to the government can do so. They have the same admin requirements that we do. Any government agency that wants to buy a drone can buy any drone, whether or not they're on the cleared list. This is just the list of drones that we have looked at and can provide some of the documentation for to try to make that acquisition easier for our DoD partners. So just to highlight some of our current projects, Short Range Reconnaissance Tranche 1. So I talked a little bit about the Blue UAS, where it started. So it did start with SRR Tranche 1. So SRR Tranche 1 was a prototyping project for the Army. It's those 5 drones in the top right-hand corner. They were all competing for a Army program of record. During that period of prototyping, the NDA was passed and the executive order was signed. And what that signaled to us was that there was going to be a lot of confusion in the DoD and probably in the broader government about what you could or could not fly. So all 5 of those drones that were in competition for that program of record were pretty good drones. They were all NDA compliant because that's a requirement for the military. They're all fairly secure. Each has its benefits and its detractions, so there's pros and cons across the board. But the Army was only ever going to pick one of those drones for their program of record. That's just how PORs work. So DIU said, well, what if we got all 5 of these drones approved for any DoD user? And that was our first Blue UAS activity, and we called that project Blue UAS 1.0. The issue with that is that all 5 drones are flavors of the same capability, right? They're all sub 3-pound personal reconnaissance, no secondary payload drones. The analogy I like to use is that they're all luxury SUVs, probably a little more than most people need, but they just do one job. The issue with that is that because we said they were approved for procurement, some people interpreted that as they were the only ones. And we've never said that this was all encompassing, right? That was the whole point. They can't do every job a drone can do. So there was a lot of feedback from the federal government, from our interagency partners, from state and local governments saying that, hey, these 5 drones don't answer my needs. And my response is, you're absolutely correct. They may not, but that was never the intention. These were supposed to be an option. So that led to our Blue UAS 2.0 effort, which kicked off in April and May of last year. We put out a solicitation to industry. Hey, we want NDA compliant drones that are less than 55 pounds. And we got all kinds of submissions. We went through our competitive selection process for that, and we awarded contracts to 11 vendors to work with us as we prototype this on-ramping process. And we're starting to see the fruits of that effort come out now in Blue UAS 2.0. The first drone has cleared our admin processes right now, and that's the SenseFly EB TAC. We should see the FreeFly Alta X right behind, the Ascent Spirit behind there, and then so on. That list of cleared drones lives on our website. It's diu.mil/blue-UAS, and I'll put the link in the chat later. But that's where we're going to keep the list of drones that we have approved or is on our cleared list. So some of the other projects we've been working on, I talked about the framework. So the whole point of framework was to prototype new cameras, new radios, new data links, not for government use, but for anyone in the drone industry to use. So we're seeing some of those out there right now. You got your Hadron, Skydio's got a new radio coming out soon. Some other cameras on their software packages, the Modal AI Voxel 2, as an example. Those are available to any integrator to use for their system if they choose to. Another project we have going on right now is called the Soldier Robotics Controller. On the DoD side, right now, usually your hand controller is tied to a single robot. And if you have to use more than one robot for your mission, then you have more than one hand controller. And the DoD, ounces equal pounds and pounds equal pain. And I'm sure for first responders, you have the same thing. If you have 3 robots and 3 hand controllers, it's just 3 things you got to maintain. So we're trying to create a interoperability profile and a swappable radio module for any hand controller to try to reduce the quantity of kit needed for robot applications. And then we have a couple other projects in the Blue ecosystem as well. Tranche 2 for SRR just kicked off with the Army. That'll be another period of prototyping for the next generation personal reconnaissance multi-rotor, et cetera. So here are the Blue UAS 2.0 systems that we are analyzing. It's entirely possible that not every system will make it through our cleared list because we are holding them to the DoD standard. But these are the types of drones we're looking at. The idea was to expand the capability that was already approved via the 1.0 effort to include secondary payload capable drones, some mapping type drones, again, just increasing the variety. As I said, the first system to make it through the on-ramp was the SenseFly EB TAC. The next one that we're looking at and hopefully approved here any day now would be the FreeFly Alta X. The Ascent Spirit is right behind that. Then we have the Harris Aerial right behind them. Blue Halo, IEV2, and so on. So all these systems are going through our pipeline currently. And the actual deliverable of this project is that on-ramp, that new process for on-ramping drones. So we expect in the future to be able to add additional systems to our cleared list. But for right now, we're just trying to do the proof of concept to show, yes, DoD, we can approve commercial drones for use, and make that request burden easier for anyone in the DoD. So again, here's the link to the website. We also have a shared mailbox, blueuas@diu.mil. If you have questions, you can reach out directly to us. Again, keep in mind, there's only a few of us working it, so we do want to try to get back to you if you have questions, but the most current up-to-date information will be on our website, diu.mil/blue-UAS. So that's where we're at right now with the project. I do want to leave time for questions because that's probably gonna be most interesting to you guys. So Chris, if you have questions you want to start throwing to us, we can respond to those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as expected, the question board is lighting up like a Christmas tree. So for those of you listening, please type in your questions to the Q&A part, not the chat box. Q&A. We'll get to as many of them as we can within the next 35 minutes or so. I do want to do just a quick poll to take a look at our audience profile. So as you're answering the questions, you can kind of target specifically to who's out there. So we're going to ask you just if you could tell us what sector you're working in, academia, government, public safety, industry, nonprofit, or other. That'll help us kind of steer where some of these questions are going. And looks like government, public safety, 72%. The lion's share of the audience today. We've got industry, about 20%, academia, 4%, nonprofit organizations, 3%, and others, 2%. We're going to give this about another 10 seconds for everyone to get a chance to put in, but 70% of the audience today, government, public safety, 20% industry. Thank you all for participating in that poll, and that definitely lets us know, you know, who the audience is and the perspective of some of these questions out there. So as expected, a number of questions are coming in from folks who appear to be in Florida. They're asking about the DMS list, and Shelby, I can read the questions, but maybe you just want to speak to that broadly first.
Sure.
We'll dig into some of these. Yeah.
So I'll take another opportunity just to sort of give my disclaimer up front, right? So I'm active duty military. The DIU is an organization underneath the Secretary of Defense. We're direct report to OSD R&E, Research Engineering, and our primary focus is the Department of Defense. As I said before, we're not naive. We know that if we make moves or take action in the DoD, that has ripple effects across public sector in terms of other federal government, state and local government, but also in industry. So we don't want to be, you know, so narrow-minded to think that we can operate in a vacuum. With that said, the Blue UAS effort is targeting DoD, but the benefits can apply to other government agencies as well. We may end up with slightly more expensive systems, typically because we have different cybersecurity requirements than other agencies. But our idea is to keep costs down, stimulate the industrial base, and provide options to the DoD. Blue UAS 1.0, those 5 drones were prototypes for the Army program of record, as I mentioned before, for SRR. Those were the 5 drones that we analyzed, right? The Skydio X2D, the Teal Golden Eagle, the Vantage Vesper, the Altavian, which is now the FLIR Teledyne Ion M440, and the Parrot Anafi USA Gov or MIL. I understand that the Florida legislature passed a law that looked eerily similar in content to that list, but it didn't have the drone name, it only had the company name. So I can't speak to, you know, how that's going to manifest or what changes would be required for people in Florida. I just want to offer up that, you know, we at DIU looked at 5 drones, and the current list for the Florida law lists companies. So as an example, Skydio has been a great partner with us, and you know, they were selected for the SRR program of record, the X2D. It's now called the RP28 Alpha. And we like that drone. We like the company. That, you know, we have a lot of great efforts ongoing with that company, but we did not select for the cleared list their commercial product, the Skydio S2D, or I'm sorry, Skydio S2, because there are a lot of, while that system is very low cost and it's certainly very capable, it was not NDAA compliant, which is, again, the law that DoD must follow. So even with a company that we do work well with, that we have a lot of ongoing projects, we didn't approve every one of their systems because of the laws that we have to follow, again, the NDAA. So that's why our cleared list will often have a single drone from a vendor, even if they have multiple offerings. It's because those are the drones we looked at. And then we also have an obligation to do some amount of configuration management just to make sure that the thing that we did approve maintains its approval status through our authority to operate. So, for example, there's the X2, the enterprise option that has all kinds of additional capabilities from the vendor. It's a great system, but that configuration may not be the Blue UAS configuration because it didn't go through our analysis process. I use those two examples to highlight that not every drone or every configuration of a single drone is considered a Blue UAS because it is a snapshot in time. We have hooks in place to update it, but it still is a slow and arduous process. And we want to maintain our pace with commercial industry, but we still have to go through the government, approval processes, which is not easy. So for the Florida law in particular, I know that they list vendors. I'm sure that there are people, actively addressing those issues and maybe trying to get that list expanded. I will say that.
Actually, Shelby, it has been amended. Senate Bill 2512 contains some language where they will be listing out manufacturers and specific models. So we're expecting that to be signed by the governor at some point.
I think that's I think it's great for other agencies to maintain. We know that by producing a list, the best that list will ever be is probably the day you publish it, right? So changes always happen. If you bifurcate yourself from commercial development, you're not leveraging the update process that a normal industry company would go through. These are known challenges. So list making in and of itself is difficult, and it's hard to update, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't be done, right? So that's our effort on Blue side, is to maintain our list and update it. And I would hope other organizations that do the same thing have a plan in place to make sure they update it to keep pace with commercial development.
One question that came in, and I think you answered it, but just for clarity, after a platform is accepted into the program, what steps, if any, are taken to ensure continued compliance with that platform? And it sounds like it's just, you're looking at it the day you look at it, and anything that happens after with firmware updates, that's beyond your control.
A little bit yes and no. So it's a very dense and difficult process that I'm learning more than I ever intended to about our authority to operate, the ATO. So the way we are going to get after it for Blue is every quarter, the vendors will have an opportunity to update their Blue configuration in both software and hardware. So if you imagine that there's a circle, everything inside the circle is Blue approved, from the air vehicle to a hand controller to a radio data link configuration to software versions for the air vehicle, hand controller, and radio. If you want to update that, it has to go through our ATO process. And again, we're going to do that quarterly. So if they're using firmware version 1.0 for the air vehicle, and they've created a new feature where it can do a barrel roll. I love barrel rolls. I want my guys to be able to do barrel rolls with their drones if they want to. So I want that feature. But we would have to analyze that firmware update, look for change analysis, look for vulnerabilities, et cetera. And if it proves out to be acceptable, then version 1.0 of air vehicle firmware, for example, would be added to our configuration baseline document. So then the Blue UAS configuration would include version 1.0 through 1.1. So that creates a burden on us to maintain the configuration management, but we have a quarterly review process to try to help us with that, and then make sure that information is available. That way, if you buy that drone, now you can do barrel rolls too.
So a number of questions coming in, and one is right here from the Q&A. My company is the OEM of a Group 3 and Group 5 UAS. Do we need to be on the Blue UAS list? And if so, how do we apply? I think that's, we're seeing a lot of questions from different enterprise and industry manufacturers wanting to know, what is the onboarding process? How can they participate in the Blue UAS program?
Sure. So the simple answer is no, you do not need to be a Blue UAS. I mentioned that earlier. there's nothing particularly unique about what we're doing. I understand that everyone does it, and that in and of itself may be what is unique, distinguishing factor for us is that we are doing some of this stuff. Any drone vendor can sell any product to any government organization, provided they adhere to that government organization's requirements. For the DoD, we have the NDA we must follow. There's also a series of cybersecurity documents that we have to follow as well. So you don't have to be blue. But again, we're not naive. We know that being blue will help make it easier for certain government organizations that don't have access to some of those admin levers to gain access to a system. So we know that there's value in being blue. We understand that. We want to expand the list and refine the list, but you don't have to be. It's not meant to be a barrier. Again, as I said earlier, we're trying to be pathfinders, not gatekeepers. Now for group 3 and group 5, the whole point of blue is to try to stay price competitive, right? The idea here being the individual user in the DoD doesn't have the access or budget to do the normal airworthiness, ATO, cyber analysis for large drones. And they may only have small discretionary budgets, operations type budgets. So I can't tell you where that line is, but the idea is to be low cost as well. If you're a group 3 or group 5 drone, you're probably going to price yourself out of what we would be targeting for Blue UAS anyways. Again, I don't have that dollar figure to tell you right now. We're still working on our process and trying to encourage adoption across the DoD. So the short answer is no, you don't have to be blue, but I know that that's not satisfying because they're probably being told by government partners that you have to be blue. Please connect me with your government partner, and I'd be happy to walk them through that as well.
You know, and I think you touched on this before. I think there's a misconception out there that there's a really large team of government people working at DIU day and night analyzing different UAS with unlimited funding. Just to set the record straight, what does the composition of your team look like, and you know, how well funded are you to accomplish this mission?
Sure. So I'll start by saying there was a problem space in the DoD with regard to COTS UAS. We weren't allowed to have them. And as a drone pilot in the Marine Corps, knowing that my Marines wouldn't have access to commercial technology, that we have a great program office that fields interesting drones, but that, you know, the commercial industry was lapping us in development. That was not satisfying to me as a Marine, knowing my guys and gals couldn't have access to the current technology. So DIU decided to try to get after that problem. So we didn't do this in response to government tasking. We didn't do this in response to this overwhelming amount of government budget. We started with the problem. The Marine soldiers, sailors, airmen, and guardians don't have access to the tech that they need, that we think they need. So how do we get after that problem? Chris and I have talked about this before, that when you're a frontline operator, sometimes you curse them. They don't get it. They're messing things up. You always curse headquarters, higher headquarters. Well, we looked around here at DIU and realized we are they, right? And the they in this case is there's 4 of us. We have a few PMs that run other projects as well. And we come from a variety of backgrounds, some commercial, some military, various experiences there. But yeah, the DIU Blue UAS team is 4 of us. And we do have a limited budget from the Undersecretary of Defense for acquisition and sustainment, and a little bit of internal DIU budget, but that's coming out of HIDE, right? So every dollar we spend on Blue UAS is one less dollar we have for other projects at DIU. So it is not unlimited funding. We have no tasking. We have no mandate, frankly, but this is a possible solution to a problem that we're hoping the DoD would adopt.
We've got a couple questions coming in regarding timeframes, both for Blue 2.0 and Blue UAS 3.0, if there is plans for that. So maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. So Blue UAS 2.0 started as a commercial solutions opening, right? So we put our solicitation on our website, where every solicitation that DIU puts out does go on our website. So I encourage you to sign up for that newsletter or check the website frequently if you are an industry partner. We put that solicitation up in spring of 2021. Over the course of April and May, we did our evaluation of the responses. We had a team of DoD and interagency stakeholders and UAS SMEs evaluate those proposals. And then we selected a group of vendors to move forward through this prototyping process with us. And those were contracts awarded over the course of the summer. So we didn't just throw darts at a board. We analyzed the submissions that came to us. We made decisions based off of price point, capability, desire from the interagency. Again, even though it was all DoD budget, we want to be good partners with our interagency friends. And we're prototyping the process. So there's a lot of discovery learning, what needs to be approved, what needs to be accomplished in order to get a government approval, a DoD approval. And as I said, the first Blue UAS 2.0 system was received their ATO 2 weeks ago. It's the Central IEB TAC. I expect the next one any day now. And then I expect every 2 weeks or so, given our capacity restraints, that we should see one of those drones that we selected making its way through the pipeline. Now, it may not make its way through the pipeline in the configuration they proposed, because we're also learning as we go that certain things that third-party vendors would, certain widgets were offered as NDA compliant components. And as we do our analysis, we're actually realizing they never were. So that causes some friction with the vendor, where all of a sudden a thing they thought was NDA compliant and would be available to DoD, surprise, it's not and never was. So now they have to do some integration, some configuration management. So not every configuration that was submitted to us will make it through the pipeline, because we're conducting that good faith analysis. And that's why there's been some delays on the Blue UAS 2.0, is that we are putting these drones through a fair amount of scrutiny that some in the industry may never have gone through. Now, for the Blue UAS 3.0, again, I'm sure people don't want to hear from a DoD organization, but we are budget constrained, right? This is, I've been begging for every nickel and dime that I can get from DIU and from OUSD ANS, because we believe this is a worthy effort. So there's not really a plan for funding the next effort, but the actual deliverable for this project is the on-ramp. So if I can define the standard for on-ramping, then communicate the standard for on-ramping, then we can offer it up to vendors to decide whether or not it's worth their hard-earned money to participate.
An interesting question just came in. Can the vendors self-pay for the on-ramp to have you look at their equipment?
So, I mean, we still have to do some development and offer that up for DoD to approve, but that, I'll be honest, that's always been my intention, is that if we can define the standard and then communicate the standard, then we get to enforce the standard. But you can't communicate a standard that doesn't exist or hasn't been adequately communicated. So the actual deliverable of this project is the on-ramp. What does that look like? How is it repeatable? How is it streamlined? And then we can offer that up to vendors potentially to self-fund or participate in with some amount of associated DoD demand, right? Like, I don't want every single drone that's ever existed on the blue list, because then it dilutes the pool. People aren't buying them, but and maybe they aren't manufacturing them. So part of it is setting the standards for what the gate would look like for that on-ramping process. That's the actual deliverable of this project. The byproduct of that is we'll get some additional drones added to our cleared list.
Awesome. A couple questions about the Airworthiness Certificate you mentioned. Can the certificate be issued by any DoD service? And if so, does being on the Blue UAS list mean that Airworthiness Certificate is issued by one service? Can it be used if the system is operated by another service?
So that's a great question, right? This is a point of contention, is that all services use the same MIL handbook for their source documentation for how to do airworthiness, but they implement it differently across services. So the Blue UAS are all going through the Navy. I can't stray so far from my tribe, right? As a Marine, I know the Navy process a little better. So we are using the Department of Navy airworthiness. They call it an interim flight clearance. And it's issued for the Navy for shore-based operations. Some will be issued ship-based operations. They'll have a battery certification, and LSR, a laser safety review board review if they have a laser in some capacity. And that is a Navy IFC. The Army and the Air Force go about their airworthiness slightly differently. So one of the secondary tasks for this project is capturing all those differences and going to those agencies and saying, here's the homework I did for my drone with the Navy, Army, is this acceptable? Can I give you my homework, give you the artifact to maybe accelerate your airworthiness process for your soldiers? Again, the point is to try to save time and money for the individual and for the services. So if we do it right and show our homework, then hopefully the Army at least has a head start on their process, and same for the Air Force. But the airworthiness receipt that we are getting is an interim flight clearance from the Navy.
A question came in about counter UAS or drone detection and whether DIU has any oversight or plan to develop any kind of process in that area.
I don't even want to dive into it because I know that's it's a hot topic. We have projects actively in the counter UAS space. There's a joint counter UAS office in the DoD that is the honcho for that. But I'm going to hide from that question because it's complicated and nuanced, Chris.
No worries. Another question: can federal or other government agency employees visit a DoD or DHS facility to see or demo Blue UAS in real life and see their true capabilities to help make decisions? Is that something?
Yeah. So we had a series of demonstrations early on for us to evaluate the capability. It wasn't exhaustive. It wasn't all inclusive. It was a demonstration. So I wouldn't call it a test and evaluation event. That's some of the misnomer within the DoD because T&E means something to a lot of people. So we call it a demonstration. We've always intended to do additional demonstrations. I'd love to do one here in the spring in the DC area. I'd like to do some geographically, disparate areas because we did one at Fort Hunter Liggett in California. We did one at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. So I would love to do more demonstrations where I can invite all the vendors to one place as a petting zoo or a show and tell, right? Because I don't want to try to guess at every federal or state or local or first responders mission or their budget. The other part of Blue UAS is that I don't know your mission and budget. So let's try to get some drones that are possibly could answer your needs approved so that you can make the best decision based off of your mission and program budget. So yeah, I would love to do more demonstrations where I can invite all the vendors to one place, do a fly off, meet and greet, petting zoo type activity. And we just don't have any of those on the book because we haven't had that demand signal from our government partners. But if there is demand for it, I would happily set one up again.
We're getting a couple questions come in about specific companies and manufacturers. Is that something you want to delve into here? Or would you prefer to maybe handle that at Exponential next month?
It's probably best if we do it Exponential because I'm not naive. I know that everything I say is going to be taken as gospel. And that my disclaimer up front is I'm not a contracting officer. I can't obligate the government. Maybe I should say that up front, right? When we do our analysis, we are not going through and validating necessarily performance characteristics of the system, nor are we saying that it's 100% secure or useful or viable for every operational environment or use case. The Blue UAS vetting is meant to capture vulnerabilities as a snapshot in time in the system and communicate those vulnerabilities via the ATO process to end users, right? So an example of that vulnerability and why this is important is that some of these drones may have a USB-C port for integration of third-party payloads. In the DoD, that is considered a risk because it's an open access point to the system. So traditionally, DoD systems don't have that because the way you close that risk is to negate that capability, take that USB-C port out. We're taking a different approach I'm trying to describe and categorize the risk. Hey, this drone has an open USB-C port. Maybe don't plug things into it that don't belong on it. And if someone gets a hold of it, they may be able to extract your information. Define the risk, communicate the risk so that people can make risk-based decisions. So that's why I don't want to get into certain drones right now, because I don't want to get into I validated all performance characteristics, or I'm willing to say that this drone is 100% secure for every use case.
Got it. And quick plug, as we mentioned Exponential, you will be speaking with the DIU team here in Florida at AUVSI's Exponential April 25th and 26th at the Drone Responders Conclave and the Drone Responders Forum. So we're going to answer as many of these questions as we can today, but we're not going to get through all of them. So I definitely encourage those of you who will be coming to Exponential or thinking about coming to Exponential to plan on talking with Shelby and his team a little bit more in detail there. And for more information, visit expo.dau.gov www.droneresponders.org. Back to the questions and comments. We really respect what DIU is doing to speed up UAS market for the American-made solutions. However, the active press releases of the limited few that can get through the process is damaging commercially to the rest of the vendors. Can this active marketing be curtailed so as not to hurt other vendors? I mean, do you guys have any control over that?
No.
Okay. Okay. Is there a process for gaining DIU funding for a clean sheet UAS?
Sure, yeah. So I mentioned our Foundry project. So we don't do speculative prototyping, and no shots at organizations that do. We don't create new stuff. We don't do speculative prototyping. Our process is focused on taking a DoD or government problem and saying there's probably a commercial solution to your problem. So we have the ability to potentially do clean sheet stuff, but we wouldn't do that on our own volition. If a DoD end user came to us and said, we have a unique problem that can't be solved by current inventories, then we would put that solicitation out to the government, or to the industry rather, and say, hey, who thinks they can solve this problem, and give us your best guess. And just as a quick plug for that process, the CSO, and there's not just in drones, we do CSOs for all types of capabilities. We have a bunch of portfolios of DIU, AI, ML, space, cyber, energy, autonomy, and human systems. So we put solicitations out all the time, and any solicitation we put out is backed by a DoD partner with a DoD problem. So again, it's not speculative. It's not a DIU initiative. It's someone else's problem that we're trying to help them solve. So that funding would usually flow from our DoD partner or our government partner, and we just provide the mechanism via CSO.
You mentioned before how that first Blue UAS 1.0 wave was really a luxury SUV, and we've talked about that it's really, you need different types of drones for different types of missions, wide area mapping. Here's one asking, have you looked into any spray drones for mosquito or vegetation control?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you're right, Chris. Yeah, and I didn't close the loop on that analogy, but yeah, the first 5 drones are all sort of luxury SUVs. The whole reason we did 2.0 was I want a sports car, I want a pickup truck, I want a motorcycle, I want a Mack truck. Let me increase the variety that at least we've looked at, because I know we haven't answered everyone's mission set. So for that unique capability, there are some systems on our 2.0 roadmap that can carry secondary payloads. Now, a quick item of note is that, unfortunately, the current ATO process includes anything that is incorporated into the system. So a Blue UAS configuration includes the payloads that we've looked at. So I've told all these vendors that if some customer out there in the world wants them to add a flywheel or a sprayer or a fire hydrant, I don't care. We still got to look at it. Otherwise, we can't say it's a Blue configuration. So I don't have the budget to go out there and guess at every available payload. And I know that that's going to cause friction too. Again, I never said this was the answer. But if somebody has a unique need via payload, I would ask that request come to us from the vendors that we've already worked with, or via the on-ramp in the future, because we still have to do an analysis from a cybersecurity perspective before we can say it's part of a Blue configuration.
Along those lines, a question: are you interested, or are you looking at any of the drone in the box solutions that are out there?
So there is one currently on the roadmap. There are lots of drone in box configurations out there. We understand that. One of the pain points of this process, and this may not be interesting to the group, but I'm going to say it anyways, is that the ATO process for UAS is not particularly elegant or modern. So drone in a box usually implies some network connectivity. And that right now is a bridge too far for Blue UAS. Doesn't mean we're not working on it. Doesn't mean we're not going to stress test the system. But the fundamental approval of these systems comes with it a closed loop nature of a system. So it's a hand controller, some sort of data link, or some sort of GCS, some sort of data link, and a air vehicle. Drones in boxes typically need network connectivity to be useful. Otherwise, why would you have a drone out there just looking at stuff? So that is a challenge, but we have one in the pipeline because I want to stress test this challenge. But that is it's a known weakness of our ATO process.
Question here, if you could expand on the specific cyber requirements for the drone, or how you look at the drones in relation to cyber.
So I don't want to get into sort of the details because frankly, it's beyond my depth. I'm a Marine with a history major. So I want to try to be honest about my own limitations. Every cyber scan is conducted in accordance with the risk management framework and the DoD manuals and instructions for cybersecurity. So, I have those written down somewhere, so I'll be happy to share those with someone at Exponential. I'll bring with me my list of references. But right now, the way our methodology is, we're doing gray, white, and black box testing of the system, looking at the security profiles and practices of the vendor of the system as well, and then making a risk or vulnerability recommendation to an assessor, who then does an assessment of those vulnerabilities against our requirements for the ATO, and then makes a recommendation to our authorizing official whether or not to approve or accept that risk. So we're not trying to engineer out every risk, but we're trying to catalog as many risks as we can find. But we also know it's a snapshot in time. So part of our ATO is also a call to anyone out there using the system. If you find a vulnerability, we can't fix it until we know about it. So part of this is also the feedback loop to the vendor, where, Chris, if you're flying one of the Blue UAS drones and you notice that the Wi-Fi on your hand controller turned on without you knowing, I can't fix that until someone tells me about it. So, part of this is trying to establish the feedback loop for you to reach back to me, so I can reach back to the vendor and say, hey, knuckleheads, did you know about this? And then they can provide a fix for that issue.
Got it. We've seen a number of questions come in about the GSA list and the impact that Blue UAS may be having. Are you able to speak to that, or is that really something GSA needs to address?
I can. I don't want to put words in their mouth. Right? GSA has been a great partner for this project, so I don't want people to think that we dislike GSA. When the executive order came out in January of 2021, GSA realized that there were a number of UAS on schedule that would not meet the intent of that executive order, that they may have components from covered countries. And then more importantly, GSA realized that they may not have a vetting process to validate whether or not a drone or a component was compliant with the executive order. So as a risk reduction, they removed all UAS off of the GSA schedule because they couldn't validate the compliance of those drones. As an example, this is not meant to be an attack on anyone, but most vendors will happily put a waving American flag GIF on their website, swear up and down that they're compliant or 100% American made, and they may or may not be, right? So there's some sort of vetting required, unfortunately, for this process, and GSA realized they didn't have that in place. The only existing vetting process that was public was the DIU Blue UAS. So that's why those 5 systems were put on GSA. It hasn't been without challenges, right? The configuration management has been a challenge. Naming conventions, availability of systems are a challenge. We know this. So GSA is meant to be an option for anyone to procure a drone, but it's also not the only option, right? Drones are available via direct purchase order. They're available via Defense Logistics Agency. They're available via all kinds of methods. So GSA was also never meant to be the only way that people could buy drones. And if someone's being told that that is their only mechanism for acquiring drones, that just, in our experience, is simply not true.
We've got a number of questions coming in regarding COTS. One person's asking if you could kind of get into a little bit more about the definition of COTS. Another one, the primary concern with COTS, whether it's someone taking control of a drone and using it with malicious intent, or someone gaining intel from what is seen. Anything you care to speak to there?
Sure. So, I mean, I don't have a textbook definition for COTS for you. COTS, implies commercial off the shelf, that there's a variation or an availability of this system to the broad general public. Now, for example, the SenseFly product, they made a configuration change from their commercially available product, the EBX, and they have a new product they call the EBTAC. The difference there is there's an amount of encryption on the data, and they have the ability to operate in what they call covert mode, where there's no active emissions until the mission is complete. So here's an instance where we wanted to adopt a COTS product, but because of DoD requirements, the vendor decided it was actually better to implement slight modifications from their true COTS product to satisfy the DoD requirements. We understand that that's not ideal. We don't want to create multiple SKUs or multiple product lines, because then you start pricing yourself back up into the DoD market, and that's why systems today cost 6 times what they did 5 years ago, without maybe being 6 times more capable. So we want to leverage COTS where we can. We know there's limitations to that. We know that it will represent itself in different ways across products. Now, as to the vulnerabilities, they are going to vary by system, and our concerns will vary by system and by operating environment. But generally, we're looking for the best cyber hygiene, the best cyber security practices out there. And then we try to communicate the assessed risks with those practices or configurations to the user. The USB-C example is a good one. If you're not worried about a drone falling into people's hands that shouldn't have it, or you're not saving data on the system, then that risk is lower to you. But if you're operating in an environment where someone with malicious intent may get their hands on the drone if it crashes, that's a much more significant risk to you. So we're trying to communicate risk so that people can make a risk-based decision. So it's hard to answer that question for every use case, Chris.
Yeah, understood. We've got about 2 minutes left, so we're going to take one more question and go to closing comments. Blue UAS 2.0 only lists the manufacturer and not the specific SUAS like version 1.0 did. Are there plans to update this list, or is Blue UAS 2.0 just a different animal?
No, so 2.0 is listing the version of the drone that is approved. So if you go to our website, again, the current list of approved drones is on the website. What they may be referencing was the list of vendors that were selected to participate in the pilot program. So in this instance, SenseFly was the vendor selected to participate, but their product is the EB TAC. So on our website is the list of the drone, and it takes you to another series of links where we're trying to manage the configuration. Again, never said we were perfect. It's always challenges, but the SenseFly EB TAC is what's the Blue UAS, not every SenseFly product. And that list will update as drones get approved. So please refresh that website as required.
Understood. So basically visit the Blue UAS website at DIU for the latest updates from time to time, and I'm sure you'll be pushing out news releases on that as well.
Yeah, we try to keep all the information on there. We try to keep it current. Please understand that we are limited in terms of bandwidth and personnel, but we want to get as much information out there as possible. Our whole goal here is to make access to drones easier for the DoD and be reliable partners with industry. So if we're taking actions that are counter to that, please let us know respectfully and with tact and warmness, and we'll try to respond in kind.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, there's so many questions here. I apologize that we would spend another hour trying to get through all these, and it would probably create a third hour's worth of questions. So I apologize to those of you who we couldn't get to. I mean, I'll tell you, Shelby, there's fan mail, there's hate mail, there's everything on here, as I'm sure you're used to at this point. I think AVSI Exponential would be a good next step to hear more about Blue UAS and the program, and have folks meet you. But I'd like to invite you back in May, and maybe we do a follow-up webinar on this to kind of continue the conversation as well here at Drone Responders.
Yeah, again, we want to get information out there, Chris. I know that we're causing friction both on the DoD, in the federal government, and state and local, and with industry, right? But I've been to boot camp. You can't hurt my feelings. So if you have criticisms or concerns, we want to hear them. We want to be responsive, but people have to understand that we are bandwidth and budget constrained. We've not been tasked with this. We're just trying to solve a problem. We saw a problem. This is our offer to try to solve it. If we're missing the mark, we want to adjust. So we welcome feedback, but people have to recognize that we are still a DoD organization, and that's my organizing principle is I want to do the best and right by soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And if we offend a few vendors along the way, sincere apologies, it wasn't the intention, but we're doing the best we can for our guys and gals out there.
And no one can argue that that's not a very sound and valuable mission. So thank you for that. 2 final questions coming in. Number 1, will you be sharing the deck, or is there a chance for people to get copies of the deck, or should they go to the website for this? same.
Yeah, go to the website for all the information. Most of the content is on there. I probably won't send it out, honestly, just because, the logistical problems, but the definitions of each of these systems is on there. We have a policy page where we are. So also, I want people to understand that we're not trying to play keep a secret. We're the ones in there knife fighting in the Pentagon, trying to get permission to share definitions and put things out there to industry to be reliable partners. So we have a policy page where we'll put the latest and greatest policy that we're allowed to share. We'll put out there so people can criticize and respond and et cetera. So yeah, the website's where we're going to put all our information. There's an FAQ page on there too. If your question isn't answered, please let us know. We'll try to get it up on the FAQ page. Again, we're limited by personnel and bandwidth, so we'll try to get as much information out there as possible.
And a couple questions asking for contact information. Should they go through the DIU website for that?
Yep. So website is Blue UAS. Too many slides. We have an email, a shared box, blueuas@diu.mil. I ask that you use discretion when emailing that box because it does. We do get a ton of inquiries, and if we don't respond immediately, it's not malice, it is bandwidth. So we'll try to respond as we can. But again, my priority is my DoD partners, but we also know we want to be reliable and good partners with industry. So we do want to reply to industry inquiries, but my priority is always going to be DoD inquiries first.
And they're asking if we're going to be sharing this recording, and I can tell you if there's no objections on the DIU side, drone responders will be able to share it. Just give us a couple days to get it up there. It won't be up right away.
I mean, I'm concerned about my hair, Chris. So as long as you think it looks all right, then I don't mind.
Well, I think your hair is amazing, and I want to thank you both for joining us again. I mean, this is just a fascinating topic that we could spend hours upon hours on really diving into. But I think this is a great first step, and I know that the folks I've talked to in the public safety community and beyond are very thankful to be able to understand a little bit more about Blue UAS and DIU. So thank you for that.
Yeah, Chris, I appreciate everyone listening in. I know that there were probably some unsatisfactory answers. Again, feel free to lobby or to send me all your hate mail. Fan mail I'm not so interested in. We're still doing our best, but again, my goal is always to make sure that we're doing the best we can for the DoD service members, but we're not naive. We know we have impacts elsewhere, so we want to get the feedback from other agencies or vendors so we can try to help where we can.
And on that note, let me just say thank you to everyone out there for joining us today for a very special Drone Responders webinar presentation. We'll look to schedule a follow-up here possibly in May or when Shelby's schedule permits. But until then, we hope to see you next month in Orlando at Exponential. And thank you for joining us.